No amount of money ever bought a second of time. If you've seen Avengers Endgame, you know that is a line that Tony Stark gives to his father in the past. And it's something that I think about whenever I am trying to reconstruct balance in my life. Because how you spend your time is the indicator of what your real priorities are. Even if you say that you want to do something else or reach a certain goal or have a certain lifestyle, something that you spend your time on is where your priorities really lie. And for myself, as I'm going back to school, as I'm trying to balance married life, and as I'm trying to balance out work and social life and everything else, I'm realizing just how important that really is. And so that's what we're going to talk about today on the Keeping Everything Simple podcast. So let's dive right in. Welcome back to the Keeping Everything Simple podcast. I'm your host and fellow student, Michael Klukas, and on this show, we boil down complicated topics into simple and actionable tips. Now, starting off with this idea of the time audit. Do you know how you spend your time? Like, just off the top of your head, no trying to jot it down, no looking at your phone calendar, no looking at your actual calendar on the wall. Do you know how you spend your time? Now, we all probably have a general idea or a general scope for what we spend our time doing throughout the day. We might be going to school, we might be going to work, we might have hung out with a friend, or whatever the situation might be. But do we truly know where every second of our day goes? That sounds super intense and super granular. However, it's really important for us to understand the larger idea of what a time audit really entails. How well are we tracking our time, and how well do we really commit the time that we want to the things that we want? Because the truth of the matter is we are absolutely horrible at estimating, where we can say, oh, I think I'm going to work on this project for 2 hours, and it tends to only be like 20 minutes. Or we get distracted by another project, another opportunity to go do something else, and then we never fully do the work that we wanted, and the time that we were going to dedicate towards that gets pushed towards something else, whether it is hopping on to Fortnite or Warzone with friends, or it is getting sucked up into a book because we have been waiting to read the latest release from our favorite author, or it's going down a YouTube rabbit hole, which I know we are certainly all familiar with. But because of this, we get really bad at estimating where our time is actually spent, because there's so many things that pull at our attention and can be a good distraction from getting the work done that we actively wanted to get done. And the whole point of a time audit is being proactive in controlling your time. It is things like setting a timer of deep work, where it's like, I'm going to work on this one project when my senses or my work ethic is at its highest. For like morning people, it'd be before we go to work, we wake up an hour earlier and we dedicate that towards a certain project. Or if you're a night owl, then it's maybe you get your biggest burst of energy like mid-afternoon, and so that's when you dedicate time towards something. But it is really controlling the time that we've allocated towards something and being super intentional about using it and fulfilling it, because the more proactive we are in it, the better that we get at estimating how long something might actually take us to do, as well as being more realistic about where we actually spent our time within a given day. And real quick, thank you guys so much for watching. And if you are finding any value on this, if you watch this on YouTube, make sure you leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Ring that notification bell so you know every time that we upload a new episode. It really does help us out so much, and I greatly appreciate it. If you're listening to us on Spotify or a podcast app, then make sure you leave us a 5-star rating and give us a follow. That way you know, again, every time I upload a new episode. And it just stokes my ego just a little bit more. But with that, let's jump right back into the podcast. Now, this leads to the question, though, are your priorities really reflected in what you do right now? As I mentioned earlier, how you spend your time is the indicator for what your real priorities happen to be. And so that leads us to the idea of saying it versus doing it. And this is something that I personally have fallen into the trap of so much, which has been to my own frustration, to my wife's frustration, and no doubt to many other people in my life, where I will say something that I'm going to quote unquote do, and I just never get around to it. I never fully commit to it. It gets halfway done or 80% done, and that last 20%, that last 10% doesn't get completed. And that's a big problem for me because that means I am saying it. I'm just paying lip service to so many different ideas and different projects, but the actual work isn't getting done. The actual projects aren't getting completed. And that's not how I want my life to be personally reflected and the things I do to be reflected. And so that's where, again, it becomes your priorities and how you spend your time are a reflection of what you do and what is important to you. And that's why there is art in consistency, being able to say, I am going to do this. I am going to make it happen. Here is the date it's going to be done by. Here's the time I'm going to spend on it. And here's how I'm going to make it work. The art of consistency is all about building up these parameters and sticking to them because you have made a system that works for you, that makes sense to your brain and not someone else's, because that's the important thing here. No matter how many YouTube gurus you listen to, and this includes myself for the things that I'm talking about, no matter how much advice I'm doling out, the important thing is that you take it with a grain of salt until you've tested it, until you've decided, oh, this actually makes sense for me. This actually works for me, and I can do something with this. And that's the encouragement of trying to find out what systems you can put in place that will help you be consistent in your own way, not in the way that someone else tells you you have to be consistent. Real quick, if you are enjoying this episode, then you might also enjoy our weekly newsletter, the Keeping Everything Simple newsletter. Yes, there is a very obvious naming scheme going on here, but that's besides the point. If you want to get an inside look into how some of the lessons and stories I talk about play out in my life, then the weekly newsletter would be a great way to dive deeper into that, as well as getting resources and recommendations for books, articles, other YouTube videos that will give you greater insight into some of these complicated topics and how we're going to be able to boil them down more and more together. Subscribe down below in the link in description to the Keeping Everything Simple newsletter, and I will see you in your inbox. All right, let's get back to the podcast. So what do you do then? Say that you have realized that after a time audit, you aren't properly spending your time on what matters to you. How do you recreate balance that works? Well, the thing is, you start simple. You start with 1 to 2 goals in the immediate moment that you can actively start making progress towards. Now, don't try to overcomplicate it in terms of, I have to have the perfect strategy and the perfect plan. I don't want that to be this kind of hurdle that you don't get past because you feel like everything has to be perfectly in place before you can start working towards that goal of being more consistent, being more reliable, and better understanding how your time is spent. And this is important because if we're able to create simple changes, those tend to be, at least in my experience, what stick the most because we're not trying to overcomplicate it. We're not trying to make it more than it actually is. It's just a change and adjustment to our life. So choose one area, 1 or 2, depending on your bandwidth and like your mental capacity for it, and dedicate time towards actively pursuing that project or pursuing that change. So whether it is setting that timer, so that way, as I talked about in my last episode, the 2-minute rule, set that 2-minute timer to get started on a project. And then once you're in motion, you will likely stay in motion because you have the momentum behind you. Or the 5-second rule as well from that, you make a decision within 5 seconds of thinking about it. It's not choosing, maybe I should do this and then hemming and hawing for the next 20 minutes. Instead, it's, I should probably do that. 1, 2, 3, I'm gonna go do that. And then you go do the thing. So start simple, pick an objective, pick a goal, and as you try to manage your time and make your priorities more of a reality, then just consistently make small steps and small changes towards that. Other important thing here is that what doesn't get tracked does not get improved. So the important thing is that when you are trying to recreate balance that works for you and a system that works for you, you need to be tracking the outcomes. You need to be tracking what you've done, how well it worked, and how long you're actually able to focus and to work on a project. Because ultimately, if you are just kind of shooting in the dark and taking it as it goes, there's no real good indicator that you have done well, you've improved. But if you're tracking it, if you're saying, I have worked for, at first, 20 minutes. And then I've increased my amount of focus to like 25 minutes, now to 30 minutes. Even if it feels small in the moment, that is the muscle you are working, because gradually over time, and this is why it builds up on that first part of choosing a simple goal and a simple habit to start with in trying to reclaim your priorities, the more you are building it up, the more you are flexing those muscles, working on them, the better you will be, because you are tracking it so you can see where you started to where you got. And that's usually a very motivating factor in of itself. If you allow yourself to recognize that, hey, I'm making progress, and it's not just a linear progression. It goes up, it goes down, but overall, you want to be going up and to the right in a positive direction. The other thing that you have to remember here is that as you are trying to reclaim your priorities and get a better handle on how you spend your time, know that it will take longer than you think. And that's annoying. Trust me, I get it. It is super annoying. But that's the truth of the matter. It will take longer than you think. Think of it like a construction project. Whenever someone, and you may have a house or something along these lines, and you may understand what I'm saying, or you may have never bought one and you just have heard this, but expect it to take 20 to 50% longer than you actually estimate. Because even if we are giving ourselves a realistic and proactive timeline to get something done, there is the rule that the project will expand to fill up the amount of time that you give it, which is that Pascal's rule? I don't think it's Pascal's rule. So the project, Parkinson's law, that's what it is. It is that work will expand to fill the time allotted for it. So even if you give yourself a realistic or aggressive timeline, just know that it's still probably going to take like 25 to 50% longer than you're actually estimating, just because not everything goes according to plan. So just keep that in mind, that it will take a little bit longer, and that shouldn't be discouraging. It should just be reality. So mentally still aim for the goal that you have and the timeline that you're holding on to for creating a balance in your life and reclaiming, again, time and priorities. But just know that in the back of your mind, it's okay if it goes a little bit longer. Or I'm going to use the example of the weight loss I've been trying to go through. I'm now closer than I have been, and that's great. But also, it's taken me longer than I thought it would, and that's okay. So just understand that as you try to create new balance in your life and try to reclaim time, the process itself might take longer than you hope for, but that's okay. It's part of the process. And honestly, I will admit, learning to do what you say takes a lot of work. Being able to build or create anything takes a lot of work. To change your life takes a lot of work. But ultimately, if you're trying to live up to a certain goal or a certain standard, know that the work that you put into it won't betray you. It won't be for nothing, because you would have started in one position and you would have gotten to somewhere new and become someone new. How you spend your time is the honest reflection of your priorities and what matters to you. If you always say that you want to get fit, but then you've never signed up for the gym, or you've never started a workout playlist on YouTube and consistently done home workouts, or you wanted to become more well-read on a certain topic, but you never picked up a book on it, and you never dove into various YouTubes about that niche idea or that area of interest. And the examples can go on and on. You want to be a better cook, but you never bought a cookbook. You never followed a YouTube or Instagram recipe. You want to be a better artist, be a better photographer. You want to so many things. But as long as you know that how you spend your time reflects your priorities, then you can really understand, okay, what is something that is meaningful to me that I can truly say I'm dedicating time towards. Because as you audit your time, you can reevaluate your priorities and then recreate the balance that's right for you through that effort and through that process of practice, through that effort and through that process of building systems, reclaiming it in your own time, in your own manner. So what's your priority today? With that, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. Looking at notification bells, every time that I upload a new episode. If you're listening to us on Spotify or another podcast app of choice, make sure you leave us a 5-star rating. That really helps us out so much, and I greatly appreciate it because it shares this show with other people just like you. But have an amazing day, you amazing people. I will see you all next episode. Keeping everything simple. Go out there and do great things.